In 2018, a video appeared for a few people. The Infinite Ikea, a video of an SCP-3008 inspired game called Lone Survivor. Beginning as nothing more than a student side project in 2017 and becoming something more serious later, it explored the interesting concept of being lost in a seemingly endless furniture store with no guarantee of escape. It's a really good what-if scenario on survival. You want to escape, but you have all that you need here to survive, so how bad could it be? Well, it doesn't take too long to learn that the horror is the place itself. A familiar place, yes, but one that you have no bearing. A place where you could never find the exit and forever be lost. The last update for this game was on May the 1st, 2020. According to someone who knows something about what allegedly happened to the dev, they were basically struggling in their finals to work on the project, but also implied that they lost the data, they lost the work for the paid version. Since then, it was handed over to a new developer called Imperial, who pretty much had to rebuild whatever was lost. However, in the process, they appear to have done some first-hand research. They went in here. And that's why I'm in here with you, to not find them, but to instead explore this concept. Because it's such a fun idea, such a cool scenario, one that has never really found its full potential, and surely there's got to be more to it than what was left behind. In 2017, user Mortos on the SCP Foundation wiki posted what is now the 10th most voted entry, and that entry is of course SCP-3008, aka the Infinite Ikea or SCP Ikea. I think we all know what an SCP is by now with all the animations, let's plays, theories, and that funny game. It's a maybe fictional anomalous object, entity, or location documented, secured, contained, and protected by the SCP Foundation. There are different classes of SCP, and this one is Euclid, which means it's unpredictable, partially understood, and difficult to fully control. This entry specifically details an abandoned IKEA store that appears normal from the outside, normal when breaking into, or even just entering via any other door. But take the front door, the main entrance, and you've only got a few steps before your way back goes out of sight and out of reach. I hate to be the one to break it to you, but you could be stuck in this place, walking for miles and miles on end before you find any way out of here. So of course, the typical scenario in a situation like this is one of survival. And boy, am I surviving. As you can see, I have myself, I have a base, I've got a lot of supplies, and I'm gonna be honest, man, I am struggling. In the entry itself, it makes mention of a guy who managed to escape, but unfortunately was followed by a staff member. They didn't survive. However, they did have a journal. And it's this game, Lone Survivor by Thaumiel Games, that in its very own unfinished, rough and unready state, contains what I believe to be the most journal-accurate take. There's a maybe infinitely high ceiling, randomized apartments, many of which look identical, canteens that mysteriously restock overnight, and distorted faceless humanoid staff of which are docile in opening hours but will go nuts if attacked and actively hunt you down when the store is closed.
The store is now closed. Please leave. The store is now closed.
These are, in my opinion, the bare bones basics to what makes an SCP Ikea game an interesting survival experience. Also, whilst researching this, it turns out that Ikea actually have their own games. One is flipping pancakes and the other one is quite literally just looking at furniture. What I noticed after my first hour of Lone Survivor was just how easy it is to get lost. You think you know which way you went, but when everything looks near identical, it's hard for your brain to map out the area. This isn't SCP Ikea specific, it's the same as wandering into the woods, taking a shortcut that was meant to be a straight line through, only to veer off slightly and not know where you are or how to get back. I've seen that tree before, is the Lost Navigator's version of cope. So then, mark the trees, break the branches, or in Ikea's case, place chairs pointing seat first back to the last chair you placed. If you found yourself in a situation like this, you won't have a map, and you don't have one in this game either. So naturally, you're going to use what you can around you to leave some kind of breadcrumb trail. And I feel like that on its own really brings you into this world even more. But why even do this? Where would the chairs lead back to? You would have walked far and lost sight of the elusive exit well before you even realize what's going on. Well, as any sane person would know, all chairs lead back home. And thanks to binge watching a whole load of videos of Lone Survivor back in the day, I knew exactly what to do. Find a canteen first, then secure a base. And you'll want to do that fast because it gets very dark very quick. And the staff do not mess around. They can rip through your health bar within seconds. So of course you need security, and that's why being in a furniture store with furniture that you can move around makes the actual base building part feel more immediate, more relatable. I mean, yeah, crafting bases like any standard survival is cool, but simply moving stuff around sounds like the average Joe kind of solution. There's something quite real about it. It unlocks that childhood mentality to see the potential within the mundane. The impulse to equate cardboard with kingdom or bedsheet with den is something I think we've all experienced in some form or fashion. In practice for this game, it's very simple. You create a perimeter of stacked furniture, then they break through, or you stop them before they do with traps and weapons. The issue in this specific example is that the furniture is lore accurate. Breaks easy. Thankfully though, on my first run, I found a canteen asset merged inside a wall that provided an indestructible base with basically a free food delivery service. It made this run way too easy, and when you realize that these guys can't do much against a fridge or even look up, the threat of the situation becomes a bit trivial. A bit like the Roblox experience, where they've got entities that run fast and sound like Obama.
Swords now closed. I sit in the building.
Now, I've got to be honest, Roblox is one of those games where I've only ever seen it in memes or brain rot. But the whole idea is that you join different worlds or experiences created by other users, and with the level of creativity that there is, you can pretty much find anything that's had some kind of cultural significance. Which is why there are quite a few SCP-3008 worlds. The most popular even to this day is quite simply called 3008 by Ugly Burger. And if you didn't quite understand the power of a child's free time, it has 2.8 billion visits since its release in January 2019. Granted, the popularity was probably more down to the hype at the time, but you can see that there's the appeal for something like this. The concept stays close to heart in the way that staff don't actively hunt you down when the store is open. Canteens restock overnight, and you can use the furniture to build a base. What I quite liked about the base building is that you have the freedom to pretty much pick up any bit of furniture, rotate it in whatever way, and just bolt it to anything. It does seem a bit unrealistic, especially clipping furniture into each other, but you do have the ability to make a pretty cozy base. Then again, if you don't want to make your own, you could just break into somebody else's, steal their food, and find a cool button.
That was easy.
The staff are kind of brutal in here and will easily outrun you if you don't break line of sight. So building a base to survive is the first thing you want to do. You can't do much to them either, outside of pushing them over. And from what I gather, there's no escape, no PvP or anything else to do besides making a base that the staff can't actually break into. I'd say that that's more of a testament to the staff keeping in line with not destroying company property, but once you've got a base, that's pretty much it. The experience becomes more of a social sandbox than survival. Fighting staff is a big part of the experience, an every night occurrence you could say. And after spearing my fair amount, what would you really use as a weapon in a place like this? Surely anything you pick up could be used in some way. Also, I am well aware that I'm not casting shadows. There is something critically wrong with me right now. This is Retail Royale. It's a fairly simple but competent FPS where you're not in an Infinite Ikea, but the battleground is inspired by such. It's purely PvP, so no stuff to worry about, but you are a mannequin, which is cool. And everything, kind of, can be a weapon. If you can't find a conventional weapon, then throw something. If you don't like the thing you have, then recycle it into basic materials and make a meatball launcher. Or a gun. You can just make a gun. You can just do that. The game launched in early access April 2022 and had its full release in May 2023. It garnered some attention, some success, but it never quite left the ground in terms of player count. Sitting today as a place with very few players, and the bots, they kind of forget about the elimination zone that comes with Battle Royale games. Combat itself has this sort of rock, paper, scissors mechanic where instead it's attack, block, shove. If you block an attack, that player is stunned. If you get shoved while blocking, you'll get stunned. And shoving at the wrong time just leaves you open to attack. But it's not this combat system or even the PvP so much that stands out. No, it's the possibility of creativity that an environment like this can allow for. What I really appreciate about Retail Royale is the freedom to create weapons. You don't need to, but to gain access to better items is a big part of the experience. However, in the list of items that you can craft, I did notice a lack of creativity to it. I love the fact that you can make a meatball launcher, it's great, but arguably, there's not much else to write home about. I noticed a similar thing with Lone Survivor, but then again, that is a game that is far from finished. And to be fair, they do have quite a few craftable items to discover. Although an axe is an item you can probably find, or a spear is something you could quite easily make, being in a furniture store has the scope and room to provide some unique and fun crafting options. We're in an Ikea, man. Let me be British and make a quad stabber with a chair. Or tie weights to the handles of one of those Ikea bags and make some kind of bag launcher. I wouldn't say the possibilities are endless, but there is enough here to get creative. Dead Rising 2 is the first game that comes to my mind when thinking about everyday store products being used as weapons, especially considering the simple but still fun to explore crafting options that basically range from conventional that makes sense to screw it, let's just have fun. Granted, this is a different type of game. I mean, a large part of it is quite literally just mowing down hordes of zombies in style. But what made that game fun to explore was this possibility. It was just exploring different stores to see whatever you could find. It's not to say that the Infinite Ikea should become some kind of playground, but even if it's mostly on an aesthetic level, the creativity with the weapons available or types of weapons you can create has the opportunity to be fun. Oh no, it appears that the store is now closed. And the Unreal Engine 5 bullshit Lumen is doing a great job. There we go. It's doing a great job. But you know what other store is closed? The store is closed. The game. And I've got to be honest about this. The mere mention of this game might spark some flames. But I'll tell you why. Because the short story is that this was a project teased and crowdfunded some years ago, but has gone radio silent for significant gaps at a time. It is still in progress, by the way. The solo dev Ziggy appears to be cracking on, but without accidentally turning this video into a what went wrong where I would need to change location to a gas station or something, we have a case of first-time dev stuck in their first-time game. Back in September 2021, a TikTok was released teasing the store is closed. As expected, it showed an endless store with staff and the ability to craft. According to the caption, it took about 6 months to get to this point. Throughout the month of September, quite a few posts were made, some reaching millions of views. And comments like, "A game like this already exists," or "Low budget version of Roblox," crowd the space amongst genuine intrigue. Then all of a sudden, the spree of posts stopped for about a year before coming back in September 2022 with a Kickstarter to crowdfund the project. With some pretty big supporters, it wasn't too hard to secure funding as well as some stretch goals. But then of course, something went wrong.
Ikea lawyers sent me a cease and desist for my furniture store survival game. They say the grey floors, furniture, and signs look too close to Ikea. Even though parodies are protected by law and plenty of games already feature Ikea lookalikes, I'm just one guy, so I'm in no position to stand my ground. They only gave me 10 days to comply, so I'm desperately changing the entire look of my game so I don't get sued. If you'd like to support me and the game, check out my bio for the Kickstarter, which ends today.
The cease and desist from Ikea threw a spanner in the works. On this day, only one other post was made on TikTok. The other socials went quiet, and the Kickstarter itself continued activity with its updates for a bit till November. Then pretty much everything public-facing fell silent. The only real sign of progress can be found via the Discord server, a place where the question of what's going on is a common occurrence. As of recording, it appears that the updates are focusing on, Jesus Christ, enemy variation. And also, if you were curious to try it out, you do need to access the Patreon in order to get a very early build. It's the same thing for Lone Survivor, by the way, but it is quite bare bones. Either way, there's already something to this that I quite like, and it's the high walls that give it this maze-like feel, especially when you go into a corridor. For such a big space, there's something claustrophobic about it. Destruction in this game is just flat out better, it's a lot more satisfying, and you can even break the walls. Which is cool because in the trailer there is the idea that maybe other enemies can do that as well. Unlike Lone Survivor and Roblox, there's a sense of verticality that goes beyond the shelves. You can get to the high ground and truly see just how lost you are. There's also a map in this build. I think it's going to remain a feature. But to be honest, a game like this is more fun without one, as part of the challenge is just to try and find your bearings amongst a repeating liminal space. The backrooms is disorientating because the whole idea, both in concept and feel, is quite literally, I've been here before. Or have I?
Nothing beats the Jet2 holiday.
Maybe a map could be a unique drop or just a crude drawing approximating certain areas. I don't know, but I feel like the inclusion of a map kind of takes away from the feeling of being lost. In this build, the enemies have faces, which kind of goes against the SCP entry itself. I mean, they're described as oddly shaped faceless humanoids, but to my knowledge, that's something that's set to change. Also in the entry, there's no specific mention of unique staff types or variations, but what I appreciate about this game is that they are at least trying to include more mobs that could make sense in an environment like this. Lone Survivor may be the more lore-accurate take, but enemy variation does add a bit more to the gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, there's not too much to this build, and speaking of building, I couldn't actually build anything. I could craft items, but I couldn't place anything down. I tried everything I could in-game to try and make it work, but there was no luck. However, just by looking at other versions covered back in the day, this does appear to be more craft-focused, as opposed to moving furniture around like you probably would in a situation like this. As I explored further, I noticed something in the sky. It was the backrooms. I couldn't find a way in, but it was interesting to see. Then as I went on further, I found an entrance to what I believe to be the SCP Foundation's attempt at securing a base. I managed to get inside, and it was interesting to explore, but there was nothing really here. Nothing to really find besides some more placeholder set pieces. In the original journal entry, the only evidence of the SCP Foundation that was witnessed was of a drone flying over town. Funny enough, in Lone Survivor, you can find the odd drone, and when I first heard one of these buzzing around, I legitimately thought that I was going insane. But no, in both of these games, there is some kind of evidence of the Foundation. To switch focus back to The Store is Closed, it got me thinking as I explored this place further as to if they would add more crossover content from the SCP universe. I mean, with how many things have been documented, there's a lot of choice. It turns out that they were thinking about bringing in SCP-1609, which is a teleporting chair that basically teleports to any location where a person intended to sit down. It's actually quite a nice SCP, very cool, very helpful, but less so when rival organization known as Global Occult Coalition turned it into a pile of sharp splinters that now has violent tendencies. Because I mean, of course it would, right? They threw into a bloody wood chipper, man. I would be pissed too if I was that chair. In the end, this was decided against, as to use the actual chair might cause some legal issues, even though they could just go ahead and use a different chair and pretty much do the same thing. Although when it comes to the idea of crossover content with the SCP Foundation or other SCPs, I think it would only serve to take away from the experience of being lost in an Infinite Ikea. This should just be the focus, and whatever's in here is whatever you've got to deal with. Although, with that being said, I do like the idea of just stumbling across some Foundation stuff, to see their own attempts and to even see them get lost in this place. But that kind of brings us back to the outside world, because that's where they found the journal and that's where the facility set up base to observe the anomaly. So what about escape? That's the goal, right? That's what everyone in here is trying to do. Well, in Lone Survivor, you escape via the randomly appearing door that can be located anywhere on the boundary wall, and you need a key to unlock it. This Ikea is technically not infinite, by the way. Keys can be dropped by staff, but are way easier to find laying on the floor in random locations. In this game, you can also earn XP, which means you can unlock and upgrade some skills. Night vision, speed, and jump is pretty much the way to go for hunting keys, but you can also increase the drop rate of staff. However, the only thing that I ever got from them were these power-ups, so it really is just easier to run around. The catch is that every key looks the same and you need to find the right one to actually escape, which basically turns this into more of a game of luck than anything else. Now, I couldn't find an escape in the store is closed, and to my knowledge there's no definitive way of escape that has been set in stone yet, but it appears to be a significant goal in development. The whole idea of escape kind of brings the concept closer to something like the forest. Well, more specifically, Sons of the Forest. You're trapped on an island with video essay deprived Silent Hill fans, and the overarching goal is to escape. Or not. I don't know about you guys, but I always get this internal conflict whenever I'm playing a survival game and escape is near. And as weird as it sounds, it's the thought of leaving it all behind. No matter how dangerous the situation is, it can still be a painful choice to make. I mean, just look at this setup. This is peak gaming right here. Because by the end of it, you've made a home in hell. You've not just learned how to survive, but also how to thrive. It's kind of funny bringing up Bear Grylls because it would be interesting to see him make a video on how to survive SCP 3008, but in his show The Island, it kind of had that feel to it towards the end. The men on one island and the women on the other both struggled in their own ways, but it was the ones who survived to the end who began to thrive and turn this place into their new home. Of course, this is just a show and they wanted to go back to their actual home, to their friends and family. But for a good time, this became the new normal. And what if it really did? What's so cool about survival games is the idea of what if? What if this becomes your new normal? And what if the way out was nothing more than a rumor? Well, this is where I've got to be a man of my word and say that I'm not the only one in here. And that's okay, because according to the journal, there are like hundreds, maybe thousands of lost souls stuck in Sweden. The drone flying over the town was basically the Foundation's first encounter with a town. It turns out that not only are there a lot of other survivors in here, but there are whole areas formed into towns. Towns that would be named quite literally after whatever department or area they're in. Some are small in population, while others could be in the hundreds. Who knows? Maybe a city exists somewhere in here. But why is it that there are so many people? Surely the police, the government, or outside world would form a mass investigation. Well, long story short, the Infinite Ikea anomaly appears to exist in whatever timeline or perhaps dimension that one could exist. It's theorized in the journal after noticing that certain people recall different events happening in different ways or not at all. Some had different prime ministers, some had never heard of the International Space Station, and the Statue of Liberty perhaps doesn't exist for others. Those lucky enough to make it to a town usually find refuge and take part in the community to stay alive, as it's a daily group effort to gather food, maintain defenses, and basically survive through the night. As the days, weeks, and even months go by, the idea of escape becomes more of a myth. Unless you've seen the exit yourself, it's just another rumor, and those brave enough to go out to find the exit aren't likely to ever come back, whether that's due to success or failure. You know, there's something kind of strange about these towns, strange in a wholesome way. As the journal goes on, the unique state of harmony between the survivors goes unchallenged. As we already know, food is restocked overnight. However, this does seem to be random in frequency. The only constant are the specific locations where food can spawn. Also, food here, with the population considered, is not in abundance, so rationing is needed to maintain the flow of consumption. But it's at least somewhat consistent. Although with that being said, with so many towns, so many things to fortify with and make weapons from, surely conflict between towns would break out. Some belief system will take hold, some ambition to rule will take root. To many people, the idea of escape is nothing more than pointless death. So why not just settle here? Well, in this example, conflict between humans doesn't really happen. I mean, it's a good thing, right? But why? Long story short, it's because this place, as confusing as it may seem at first, provides a common enemy and a common objective that you're reminded of every day. You're in a furniture store, a place to buy things for home. Before you're lucky enough to settle down in a town, you were looking for a way out just like everyone else. It's the stories between people, the memory of home that reminds you that we're all in the same situation, and with the odd sighting of the exit, rumors of escape, a semblance of hope for many places still remains. It's not that a town can't turn against another, or conflict between survivors won't happen, but it's also not an apocalyptic situation with no way back to modern civilization. The only common threat are the staff. They're strong, especially in numbers, yet simple to understand, predictable in nature, and are not open to negotiation. When food is fairly reliable, and there isn't scarcity to it or resources in general, why waste time fighting each other when you already know what's coming for you at night? It's also the shared knowledge of other towns falling to hordes of staff that keeps things very real. I mean, part of the daily struggle for these survivors when holding any kind of fortification were the increasingly large attacks at night. As you can see on screen, the staff can fall as easy as any other human, but if you were to do an autopsy, they appear to be made of pure skin. Skin that doesn't rot away. Which is a problem because, as you can see in my Microsoft Paint example, the more bodies piled up in any given area equals a higher presence of alive staff. Leaving bodies around your base only attracts more, so part of your survival relies on cleanup. And that, as well as the constant upkeep to hold a location, not only keeps people too busy, but also enforces the idea that you do in fact need to escape. Or at least try. You don't want to stay here, because you know it's only a matter of time. Safety in numbers is an illusion broken within minutes. Including towns and other survivors into a game concept like this will probably complicate things and drive some devs insane. I mean, in Lone Survivor, you can find some other survivors. They're very basic, don't take damage, and only want to trade with you, but when it does come to the idea of meeting other survivors, the range of possibilities goes further. If you've not played Red Dead Redemption 2, you've probably seen clips of it. More specifically, NPC interactions. Some provide side quests, some have unique dialogue. But the idea that you can encounter a bystander just asking for help, only for them to betray you, provides a fun example for where survivor encounters could go. What I found both interesting and really annoying in Lone Survivor is that you can start to go insane. You hear voices and your vision blurs, it can get really messed up at times. But who's to say that others can't go insane? That as you explore this place, you begin to find little things, evidence that something is off. Someone else is here. That you've stepped into potentially dangerous territory. And the guy asking you to go grab that fork might have bad intentions. Environmental storytelling is such a cool thing when you notice it, and whilst just throwing stuff into this level, I had fun making some kind of story, even if that story is about someone going insane at the thought of chairs, or someone in here placing cans of canned fish all over the place. You can explore this place for free on my Patreon, by the way. I'm not a developer, but it was fun learning some stuff. The thought of finding other survivors took me on a bit of a tangent that explored only one of the answers to the question that everyone in here has to answer at some point. Do I stay or do I go? To stay would be the choice of the settler, someone who's found or formed a community, someone who's either given up on escape or slipped into the comfort and daily rhythm that a town provides. I can imagine the settler concept going as far as NPC management and town building. There are examples we've all seen before that prove just how fun it can be to grow a community and fight against the threat. The game plan for each town is primarily to survive each night, and that on its own can provide good gameplay. But what if one day you find the exit? What then? Do you leave the town or go back? This is where we need to talk a little bit about the reality of this place. Purely based on the entry, the interior of the store seems to shift, like a maze trying to bring you as close to the center as possible. The exit, or exits, aren't confirmed to be in fixed positions either, with one rumored case of an exit vanishing before someone's eyes. So yeah, I guess the idea of placing chairs doesn't really work too well then. Or does it? The only places that seem to remain consistent are the towns and the areas around them. This is made evident because even trade is possible. People can go to other towns, and reliably so. In the immediate area, landmarks remain, and for scavenging parties, the areas to find food never seem to shift away. It's almost like the moment you settle down, the store stays still. Because why would it move you anywhere else when you've already found your new home? If the goal was just to survive in a town for however long, then look no further than 7 Days to Die, a game where the fun of it is to survive each night till you don't. But if the primary goal was to escape, then perhaps a different approach would be best taken. And this is where the Subnautica fans can take a breath, because similar to Sons of the Forest, the goal is to escape. But there's a bit more of a leapfrog feel to it. To make progress, you need to dive deeper, and to dive deeper, it's well worth setting up camp close to your current depth limit in order to gather resources and upgrade for the next big push. Although you'd probably have a main base, setting up little outposts that act as temporary workshops makes exploration feel a bit more on the go. And that kind of makes sense, especially if you just want to make it to the end. You're creating a foothold to get to the next step. So apply this to something like the IKEA concept, and what do you get? Well, you kind of get a camping sim, and I noticed a bit of that whilst playing Lone Survivor. You see, once I realized that this place was technically not infinite and there are 4 boundary walls, each providing the chance to find the door, my base became a means to an end, a camp to safely make things and farm XP to a point where I didn't even need it anymore. When people travel for long distances, they inevitably set up camp along the way. They do this to find their bearings, recharge, and, well, obviously survive. It could be for just one night, it could be for a few days. Either way, they create a temporary foothold that's not made to last. In a game environment, it can be as simple as having a small fortification to fight off the staff, or just a place to advance your gear before the next push. You press on forwards for a bit, you find some points of interest, and stay for a while. Then once you've done pretty much everything around here, you move on to the next place. This is why I love the concept of simply moving furniture to secure a base. It just makes sense. Realistically, you wouldn't have the time to break things down only to make a wall that's probably no better than the closet that weighs a ton. With towns considered, at minimum, I think they'll be great as checkpoints to rest, craft, and maybe do some local quests for unique recipes or items. But also, on a more sinister note, who's to say that a town, or every town you find, is going to be alive? I'm throwing a lot of ideas and what-ifs out there, but already you can start to see that we've come to the concept of a traveller on a journey. However, for that journey to be an adventure, one that keeps you somewhat curious and distracted, there must be more to it than just staff, the odd town, and repeating departments. SCP-3008 is quite limited in its own way, but the door has been left open just enough for some interesting content to creep through. And I think if you didn't want to change too much about the original entry, then other survivors really do add a lot of potential. Simply put, people are weird and can get weirder. We've already had a peek at the idea of meeting other survivors who could be bad, so who's to say that there can't be a cult that worships the staff, or bandits that hold others hostage? It could be that you encounter a stronghold full of hostiles and the fun part is raiding it. You could be the hero of the day and save people along the way. And who's to say that some structures are easy to get into? I'm pretty damn sure IKEA have their own forklifts, and I don't want to get into the whole idea of vehicles for a game like this. However, lawnmowers would be interesting. A lot of what I've said is basic stuff, but with human NPCs, there's more room to get creative. When it comes to the place itself, there is the possibility to continue the lore in your own way. Not everything is truly understood yet as to what this anomaly is. So there is the potential for a developer to continue the mystery with it. And I don't think you need to go off the rails too much for that either. For example, this place kind of has its own backrooms, what I like to call beyond the showroom, the office spaces, the warehouse sections that customers don't have access to. There could be mysteries hidden within those places, or perhaps resources that you need to progress further. And to go inside one of these places could introduce something worse than shop floor staff. With how the staff are as we know them and as they are documented, I don't see why a game like this can't provide a reasonable twist. Like the possibility of dark zones, places that are always closed, or at least perceived to be by the staff. Again, more ideas to throw into the mix, and I'm sure you'd have some better ones. I mean, in the current development journey for The Store is Closed, I have seen the idea of a car park being thrown around, and something like that actually makes sense. There is a car park in most IKEAs, and exploring something like that would be pretty cool. For there to be an escape in a survival game that's probably going to be procedurally generated, there needs to be a clear direction within a directionless place, and the most straightforward way of doing that, in my opinion, is to travel as far as possible from point zero outwards. The further you travel, the closer you get to an exit. The weirder things get, and the harder the game becomes. Upon further investigation, it seems that at least with a custom mode, the store is closed is looking at something similar. Increasing difficulty the further you travel to an exit is something that you can feel and even see without a map. Perhaps you find more survivors who lost themselves before they found refuge or the way out. The further you go, the more ruins you discover of towns that didn't survive, reminding you that it was only a matter of time and that you made the right choice. But the sight of it also reminds you of the danger inside. To dwell on that point a bit more, because staff bodies attract more alive staff, and town ruins would probably have some unique loot, you end up with a justifiable risk versus reward situation. One that stays true to form and is accurate. Either way, there are opportunities to provide additional content on the journey forwards. There is room to provide unique challenges and also mystery. The journey from ground zero to the end can be an interesting experience, one that pulls you forwards deeper into hell. And that's where I'd personally take it. It's by no means the correct way or an approach that would be fun for everyone. This could be a great forever survival game where it's just you and a few mates building a fort to defend against an ever-growing horde. Either way, what I stand by is the need for interaction with the environment around you. To be able to move things, to really just use what's here against the threat. And to ultimately have fun with the idea of being stuck in a furniture store, in a sandbox of Swedish goods. Look, it's anyone's choice as to where they'll take this concept, and this video was literally just a small exploration on where it could go. Because I genuinely think that this is a really cool idea. It's a really cool situation, scenario, whatever, just to be stuck in, and by the looks of it, I appear to be stuck in the real thing, which is, bad. It's just a shame and kind of ironic in the same way that some of the developers who have tried to take on this concept have kind of gone missing, which is very on theme. But to not take any more of your time, I'd like to say a massive thanks to all of my supporters on this wall here. I'm very limited in animations. This was just me trying to put something together. And yes, you can explore this place for free on my Patreon. You don't have to support, just enjoy it. Hopefully you won't hear as much of my PC struggling in the background in the next one. Anyway, a special shout out to Gibbles by the Dozen, the Cuddly Bot, Negadan, the one with severed toes, Abby, the Meatly, Dorum Trollfist, Spooky, King Delirious, Bob the Bronto, Scotch Eggs, Big Ram, Grimber, LetterOpener.mp3, Julie, Roland Shane, and Bork Laser. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.